Hey, what's up, guys?
Hey,
All right. So this is the fourth meetup or the fifth? The I think it's the fourth. Um, just one second. Um, I'm going to Okay, cool. So um, today we're going to talk about efficiency in cooperatives, and we're pulling a lot of information uh, a paper from the Journal of Law and Economics, economic efficiency in cooperatives. Um, Two great guys, Scully and Porter, Zero Scully and Philip Porter, and I'll be pasting a link to where you can find this at in the meetup um, event for this today. And so you guys want to check that out. Some pretty interesting stuff in there. Um, Okay, and we'll also be following up with a blog entitled "Are Cooperatives Able to Be Efficient?" It'll be posted on blog.wolf.coop. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, let's get started, guys. My name is Josh. We've got Taylor and Watson. Looks like Brittany joined here today, and I've kind of like I've written an outline basically to go through these things. So I mean, we can just talk about them because yeah, and see what we all think. Um, Basically, just starting out, just want to consider, every business. One of the main goals is to be efficient, to get the maximum output of your production. And so, I had to think, what does efficiency really mean? And in talking to Watson about this, I mean, I think it rightfully so, meaning that you don't leave anything on the table. You're able to maximally um, and do it maximally optimize everything that you can get. You want it all, and so there's nothing left over. And so that's like a layman's term of efficiency. And so in this paper, these guys highlighted three areas of inefficiency that have to be addressed for efficiency before efficiency is met. Those are allocative inefficiencies, technical inefficiencies, and scale inefficiencies. Um, and so from there, the these are not inefficiencies that are just unique to cooperatives. These are inefficiencies that proprietorships, are not immune to. This is something that every type of business structure, no matter what joint, whether it's joint owned or what, no matter what business structure, these inefficiencies have to be addressed. But we're going to talk about them today on how you address these in a cooperative setting, because things are a little bit different here, as we're about to find out. And so, I guess we can give a high level definition of these three inefficiencies, and then just dive right in. Um, First, allocative or factor pricing, as some people like to say, inefficiency um, raises the average. That happens when the average cost of production by utilizing other than that happens when raising the average cost of production by utilizing other than cost minimizing combination of inputs. And so the uh, I higher so technical managerial would be inefficiency here arises when the inputs fail to achieve their potential output, and scale would be inefficiency here arises whenever an output that does not minimize long run average cost is chosen. And so, given a cooperative setting, I like to dive in the inefficiency that I think was most interesting, and that is the technical or managerial area. And this is the one I think is most obvious to those who may not have, like, if you haven't read the paper yet, or I think it's just most obvious in a cooperative setting, and it's one that's it's pretty prevalent, and so I like to talk about that one first. Basically, what is a technical problem, and why does it occur? Um, so basically, when inputs fail to reach their potential output, basically, what are the inputs? Inputs in the cooperative would be its members. This is essentially, and I mean, and guys, and Taylor Watson, feel free to interject anytime while I'm not trying to do a speech or nothing. Just want to, get the ball rolling. So if I say something that sounds crazy, uh, feel free to just jump right in. Um, so speaking about the technical inefficiency, um, it's essentially stating that there's a control problem. Control is, or let's say, better put, a managerial problem. Um, when you have in a setting of a cooperative, so well, in a proprietary firm, that's a traditionally structured hierarchy. Um, Managers have employees. They manage what they do, and they have contracts. An employee has a contract with the business. They are to be managed by the manager, and they are to perform their task optimally and as best to their ability. I mean, that's a general assumption of what a employee manager relationship would be like, as far as business wise. But what happens when that hierarchy and um, is eliminated, and ownership and control, aka management, is distributed throughout the organization? That's the case when we talk about cooperatives. There isn't a hierarchy, and each member is a partly an owner of this, and each member therefore has a piece of control. Better said, it's autonomy, or but the so what happens here when there's a control problem? The control problem just
What do you mean by
instinct.
control problem?
Yeah, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So later on in the paper, the um, the economist Scully notes that he defines a control problem when ownership and control are not centralized. So he's essentially defining the distribution of ownership and control throughout the cooperative can introduce a problem, and this problem is, once these once the decentralization of ownership and control happens, it introduces a situation where there are no perfect contracts between managers and employees to provide incentive for maximum performance. So basically, with this contract, I mean, at the very extreme, if you don't do your job, you're gonna get fired. If but I mean, there's multiple levels in between that. Though, if you get bad marks, there's no promotion. There's no chance of you know, increasing your salary. There's several different things, including in a contract between manager and employee in a proprietary company, that incentive uh, that provide incentives to perform at your best. And so that's what Scully is describing as a control problem. And so here, that the control problem is a result of a technical inefficiency in a cooperative. And so, why does that problem occur? We just said it. Control and ownership are decentralized. But the thing is, how can you solve this problem? And do you guys even think that it's a problem for control and ownership to be decentralized?
Well, I guess like how they say in the paper, they use the terminology of principal and agent. So that probably would be a good thing to define. The principal is the person that asks for work to be done, and the agent is the one doing the work. And if you use that model to define the control problem, it's whenever some situation where the principal is asking the agent to do work, and for in some way, some reason, they there's something left on the table. It's inefficient, and that could be because of what they call asymmetrical information. So the agent knows some things that the principal doesn't know, and it could be reversed. It could be the principal knows some things, and he's asking the agent to do something that's too much. That's the other side of the principal agent problem. But there's all kinds of things that can happen. Um, but when inside of a some type of labor-owned, managed entity, yeah, there's some type of there's principal agent problem where it's how is it that you create a system of incentives to where everyone maximizes um, their you know the efficiencies, or they maximize what their opportunities. And that's the problem. The way that I think about it, it can be boiled down to that when we use the term or phrase perfect contracts, it can be boiled down to saying that perfect contracts are most of the time impossible to make. um, but even making contracts that are just, and when we say contract, we're talking about agreements, right? Making some type of bindable agreement where it covers all the bases is expensive. So that's really what we're talking about here. And in the traditional hierarchy, you've got the manager and the employee, let's say. And the manager can ask the employee to do some work and then monitor them, just, you know, and just make a decision on if that employee is giving enough effort. And if they're not, fire them, right? So they have a credible threat of being able to fire them or do some type of punitive action. When everyone's an owner, you have to figure out some way of penalizing. And that by itself, it's already something that a hierarchy doesn't have to do. It's just built in. The people higher in the hierarchy can punish those below. So that's something extra, and so that's costly. That's what we're talking about here, this principal agent problem.
Okay. Um, that was a great way to break it down. Um, so with this problem now, um, you know, how does a cooperative um, address that? With now that we have these, I guess, man, the obvious thing I would say would be, I think you just said it would be to figure out some type of system of incentives then
Right.
for members to, produce their maximum performance, in light of, the lack of monitoring. You don't have someone over your shoulder and you don't have, these things, then how are you gonna, what type of incentives could be produced to maximize this? What do they look like? Um,
hmm
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I would still go ahead and say that within an entity that shares ownership, this problem is going to occur. So if you look at consultancies with tiered systems, with partnerships, law firms, or other consultancies where they're partners all own the company, these problems arise. So how is it that you make these decisions? Well, evidently they're being made because large law firms exist, right? And their partnerships. So what is it that they do? Well, when you're in services and you're billable, one thing is to just let people starve to death if they don't work, right? So that's one thing that people do is keep what you kill or eat what you kill. You don't kill anything, you don't get to eat. And you just let the natural incentives ride. But then you start getting into some of these other inefficiencies that we're talking about, allocative and scaling efficiencies. So, what if we don't put anything into marketing and everybody's acting like a warrior, a lone wolf, but they're not working together? Now we got to create an incentive system to make it to where people work together. So you do some shared branding or whatever. Same kind of problem that law firms and consultancies have, right?
Hmm.
So there has to be some kind of incentive system for people to put money into or spend effort on things that are non-billable that contribute to the firm. And those if you make those types of agreements binding and you pay and compensate people for doing those non-billable things, then you've got some type of contract. And it's already something that gets done. There's books that are written on it, and there's different systems that go from very simple to very complex.
Um, okay. Um,
I would add this though. The other side is within a normal hierarchy, anybody who's been inside of a large organization, they know that but when there's a principal agent problem and it's it's not like how they're saying here where they don't have an issue. No, they do have an issue, and something along the lines of the innovator's dilemma. So if I could do a bunch of work or a bunch of innovation that would bring more to the table for the people up the hierarchy that own the corporation or whatever, but I don't get compensated for those proportionately because I'm not an owner, right? Then I also don't act efficiently, right? And so that's what the problem is where you're not an owner. You can act in such a way to where it's in your best interest to build an empire and do the least amount of work possible. So that's also an inefficiency, but that's an inefficiency within hierarchies. That's why if you were to go back 30 to 40 years, you had large hierarchies. If you were to go to, say, take an example of telecom, they've got, 5, 6 tiers of people all the way, that go up to the CEO, and it's like a big, pyramid scheme. And then you fast forward 20 years or whatever, and now all these entities are getting flatter and flatter, because they believe that having a large hierarchy and having command and control doesn't allow you to respond to the environment fast and all these other things. It kills innovation and all these things. So this is all the rage in the past 15 years, 20 years. Everyone says, okay, no, you command and control is dead. Hierarchies at that level is dead because of why it's inefficient. So and non flexible, which is part of where the inefficiency comes from. So I don't think that they get away cleanly in hierarchy. In fact, for me, that's one of the motivations for having some type of shared ownership is because people won't contribute. Within a consultancy, people just will not contribute their hard work and ideas without having some type of ownership, especially if they learn, how to sell their wares on the market. They won't do it.
hmm Um, in ours, if it's like so in a cooperative setting, in the in the case that you do know how to sell your skills on the market, you are part of a cooperative. Um, one way I look at it, I like to look at it too, as far as like how to solve this problem of providing this incentive is like try to um, even mimic the same type of incentive that is in a traditional hierarchy. The one of a promotion, moving up in the ranks, making more money, and how do you do that inside of cooperative? One way I like to think about it is basically let's let the market decide. If you are, in a cooperative, we are selling ourselves essentially. We're um, learning how to sell our skills on the market. If the market will, you know, pay you this much, then you can get this much. So inherently, that provides incentive for you to perform optimally and for you to get better. And then that's like that's putting your fate, your destiny in your own hands. And I think that goes a long way. I mean there may be problems, in itself with that, but if you're talking with a driven guy who would otherwise, be working for someone else to try to, work his way to the top, I think if you put him in this same setting that he'll perform optimally, just for you with those same incentives in mind. So, well, not just for you, but just as a part of the cooperative. But yeah, Taylor, did you have anything to add on that? If you didn't, sorry.
No, um,
So,
I
all right,
guess I guess from a when we're talking about the it's extra effort for a cooperative, so it's not just I guess mitigating the problem, but then you have to think about if you're talking to people about the overall value of going, doing something. There could be other things that end up adding up to say this is why you'd want to be a part of a cooperative. But I'm wondering if there's aspects directly related to the management portion that would, if you can decrease that overhead, right? So a lot of the issues with a cooperative is the fact that um, things take longer. The as far as coming to an agreement and everything else. So specifically regarding the overhead with trying to be accountable within the group and the monitoring and the other aspects you were mentioning, Watson. Um, Wondering what are there direct things that you can do in a cooperative that spreads that? If you have a traditional structure and one manager has 100 direct employees under them, then the monitoring is inefficient, right? So you have to deal with that similar sort of things. But I'm wondering if there's any benefits to being in a cooperative once you've gone through maybe the process of if you can set something up that decreases the fact that you don't have that direct person that's already monitoring. Does that make sense? Kind of went all over, but
Well, yeah, in the end, you're saying, is there any benefit after you got the system, which is the contract? Well, yeah, you're more flexible. Each person is operating in such a way to where they do not need direction, so they can respond to the market environment. So just by definition, it's going to be better. It's going to be more efficient. If you have to do some type of communication, there's a cost. So whether it comes down the chain of hierarchy or whatever. Um, But the problem is the making of that contract. That's the thing. But let me say this, and then I'll set the ground with talking about what I think is the real, given what they're saying in the paper, and I'm going to translate a bit, is the real inefficiency of a cooperative, the real way to measure it, right? So each each the hierarchy and the flat both need to do some type of creation of contracts. Um, you don't get away from it just because you're in a hierarchy. People can make, you know, empires and things like that, to where there's like asymmetrical information. For instance, if you work in a milk processing plant, like they say here, or if you work on an assembly line or whatever, your manager can tell how hard you're working because they used to do it, and it's not going to change that much, right? From one place to over the years, it's not. You can become a little inefficient, but not that much. If you are in a field like software or something that changes often, um, the person who's not hands-on that becomes a manager, they have that private information of how hard it is to build software or what have you for a little while, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years maybe, but it goes away. And then they're in the same boat as all regular project managers. They do not know how hard it is. So now they have to create some type of system that does something, whether it be profit sharing or whatever, that creates incentives for people to maximize. So hierarchies have that problem, right? And I would argue that any field where where it's changing frequently, they're going to have a problem. So given that, the incentive to create monitoring contracts, right? That's what we're talking about. The incentive to create. What I'm saying, both sides have to do it. And a labor managed or owned entity is really the return of whatever it is that would come from the decision. So if you're saying it's an investment, if it's I'm going to invest in some new parts for the milk processing plant and it's going to give us a return of $10,000. It's whatever that return is divided by how many people are in the cooperative or who are in the entity, who are owners, right? So the return is always going to be shared by it, just out of the box, right? With no contract or whatever. That's by default. And so the incentive to create a monitoring contract is going to be whatever returns could be had above the return /n, right? So that is less than, okay, the return in a hierarchy for the elite at the top, because they're only doing, their N is only a smaller number. It's not all the employees. So if you were to say it's, the people on the board and the executive team, whether there's like 10 people or something like that, that, or you could say, if it's a real small startup, it's 2 people, they're the owners or whatever. They're only having to share between those 2. So every single decision that they make, it affects them more. And it's easier to say, oh, I'm gonna invest, some money into the milk processing plant to make it better. Oh, I'm gonna get a 10,000 return. I only got to split that with the 2, right? And so I'm getting a lot of money back. So if I make the incentives better to where I can capture all the 10,000, maybe I won't even have to share it with the other guy, because I made the incentives to where the contract's going to be, oh, I did the investment, therefore I get to pay back. I'm going to get a large return. For whatever it is that you decide, that's going to be always better than the return that you would get by default on the cooperative side, because you're just sharing it. So the incentives are better to make better contracts on in the hierarchy. That's the difference. That's why I only find that's the difference. You still want to make contracts, but you can get a better return on the in the hierarchies. So you have more incentives if you make a contract. But just sitting around and not doing anything is also better too. And that's what we're talking about when we're dealing with cooperatives and joint ownership. If you if you do make a contract, then your efficiencies and all that stuff, because everything is pushed down to the person that's closer to the work and all that, I'd say the flexibility and all that is better inside of a cooperative or joint owned labor managed company. So, but that's what we're wrestling with here. But here's the last point. For any contract that's made, any setup, any incentive system, there's really no reason why every single company would have to make their own incentive system. If an entity, for instance, a law firm, makes an incentive system, another company can use that incentive system without doing the hard work of creating an incentive system. They can say, these guys over there did it and it looks fair, let's do it. So they didn't have to spend, they didn't have to hire a game theory PhD to create an incentive system for them, right? It's already out there and works. So I think that these incentive systems, they disproportionately, if you consider the flexibility that you gain within a cooperative, they disproportionately help the cooperatives, right? It's a lot of work, but once it's done, then everybody's, fine. And it's not really, it's not the type of asset that if you put out there, someone is a free rider and they exclude other people from using. Like, let's say within economics, somebody, there's a park for a city, and someone goes in there and occupies a part of the park, but they didn't pay for it with taxes or whatever, and that would be like being a free rider and just taking up and not letting other people use it, whatever. And that's part of, the tragedy of the commons, I guess, right? Too many people using the things that are common. Well, this doesn't have that problem because you don't exclude with this type of information, this type of asset. For an incentive system, once it's made, the person that's making it incurs the cost, but everyone else that uses it, they don't exclude everyone else from using it. So it's the same thing as say open source or anything else like that. It's the same thing as a network, like Metcalfe's law, where the amount of nodes on the network are the value of the network is the amount of nodes squared or something to that extent. So the more nodes, the more people using it, the more valuable it becomes. Like the more people that have a fax, the more valuable faxes were. The more people that use Microsoft Word, the more valuable the Microsoft Word protocol becomes. That's what this type of asset is. It's not a scarcity-based asset. So, that's kind of my long and short of this, of the whole problem of creating incentive systems which are monitoring contracts and all that stuff.
Yeah, man, it can get pretty deep. Man, I know I've read so much info and we've talked about it for so long, and I mean, this stuff can I like it. That's why I started with this inefficiency of the technical slash managerial, because I mean it's the most interesting to me. Um, the the second two, and these inefficiencies sort of blend together. I mean they sort of lean on each other as far as like the causes and results of them. But next would be like the allocative and fact slash factor pricing. Basically, when you have less than optimal capital per unit of output. And so Scully likes to say in the paper that this is because of the perceived horizon and non-transferable problems. I don't think we've touched on those, but essentially, just a quick definition: the horizon problem is saying that describes a situation in which cooperatives are less likely than their proprietary counterparts to undertake long-term investments that yield the best practices. Um, so, in layman terms, since cooperatives usually have an open door policy, membership, um, there can be inequalities between the long term members and the short term members. If we're talking about, investing into a long term investment, that may not be as ideal to someone with a short term vision in mind versus someone with a long-term vision. Essentially, the problem is that cooperatives are less likely. This is what Scully's saying. Cooperatives are less likely to invest in long-term investments that may be best for optimal performance. Um, and so the non-transferability problem is simply referring to the fact that specialists are costly to obtain within a cooperative. And you know, say why are they costly to obtain? And so, the nature of why do you need a specialist? You need a specialist because the specialist is efficient compared to a generalist. If this is your specialty, you're, by nature, almost by nature, better than someone who just happens to do this. So, um, you need the idea is to obtain a specialist to prevent inefficiency. And why is obtaining the specialist costly to a cooperative? The reason being is that in settings of a cooperative, the deliberating, talking, and actually developing a contract that's sane and making sure that everything goes to plan in order to get this specialist, it has to be discussed amongst the members. And since control is decentralized, that time it costs money is expensive. And so not just money, but even just the mental, the the just the deliberation. This that deliberation otherwise may not have happened in a proprietary firm where the decision would be centralized. It may be one person's decision to do this. It may be two persons' decisions to do this, but it's just the thought is that if this is centralized, the process of obtaining a specialist would be quicker than a decentralized position. And so, um, bringing it back home, speaking about allocative slash factor pricing, when is it that you have less than optimal capital per unit of output? It's when um, essentially, since this is a cooperative, both the horizon problem would exist in this scenario, and the non-transferability problem would exist. And so, since those two problems do exist, um, how can you, it's just it goes to say that your output would be less than optimal. Um, and so that's I thought that was pretty interesting, honestly. There were a lot of assumptions there within the paper that created this scenario, but it's I chose to look at it like this. Basically, the horizon problem. The horizon problem is one of so some members may not want to invest into long-term assets. That's just something I feel like that could be addressed with culture of the group, culture of the firm. I can understand that some people. I mean, people by nature are more risk averse or risk tolerant than others. Um, but if I honestly feel like if the culture of the firm is one of we're gonna do what's best for the company, no matter what. If you put the company first, the group first before the individual, I think it I think it adds up. I don't think you have this problem. Now, of course, you've got to get that culture and everyone on the same page to want that. But if you can do that, I think you solve that horizon problem. And then as far as the non-transferability problem, um, that is that would be. I mean, my best answer to that would be to just to work out a system that is efficient in communication, whether that's like um, that would be my best bet. I mean, there would be ways to if the specialist, honestly, I mean, just breaking it down, if the value that specialists bring is more than the value is more than the cost accumulated during deliberation, then you're winning. If not, then you're losing. But it's about, you know, coming up with a system efficient enough that this specialist won't, whenever you need a specialist for something, your specialist won't be sunk cost at the end of the day, won't be cause you to go into the negative. Um, you know, once these two things are taken care of, then all other things equal, I don't see the allocative inefficiencies being a factor for cooperatives. But I mean that's just my opinion on how you could solve it. Um, Pretty much theory, nothing really tangible there. But what do you guys think?
All right, I'm gonna read something. First, I'm gonna address the specialist in a second, but we're talking about non-transferability to bring this home. All right. In a competitive system of proprietary firms, so we're talking about hierarchies, where ownership can be concentrated, an individual can capture the entire stream of added income generated by the entrepreneurial function. That means that when the ownership is, like what I said, when the ownership is concentrated, they can innovate and capture all that stuff that they made just in that small concentrated area. That's what we talked about earlier. The people at the top being able to capture more of whatever it is that they invest in. Okay, so in the jointly controlled firms, right? So that's labor owned, right? Jointly controlled firms with non-transferable claims, only a portion of the additional income can be captured by the innovator. Again, like I said, return slash in, right? So only a portion um, can be captured of the additional income, right, by the innovator. So here, and if he's already a participant, and none if he's an outsider, so it's like people that aren't members. So the way that they're saying it, it's non-transferable. But we just already talked about that. It's only non-transferable if you don't have the contract made. You don't have an incentive system. It's in return slash in. That's non-transferable. One person, we did the investment into the milk processing plant, which is their example, and there's 10 people in the cooperative. If you spent $500, you got $10,000 returned, and each person gets 1,000. One person, it doesn't by default, and they don't get to sell each other the 1,000 with before tax or whatever. If you, like I was saying, put in the incentive system, oh, the person that puts a $500 into a milk processing plant, they get to get they get the surplus. They get the addition or whatever it is from that investment for 5 years or whatever. But that would have to be a contract. That would have to be an incentive system already predetermined. And then they did transfer the portion of the income proportionately to the person that, right? So that's where the non-transferable thing is just like whatever. And when we're talking about service-based versus product-based, services, you keep what you kill, the hours and all that stuff, it's completely it's much more suitable for an incentive system to be made. So that's that first part. Second, we're talking about um, generalists and specialists and stuff like that. So I'm going to read this out. Inefficient firms, hold on. Yeah. Inefficient firms suffering from factor price inefficiency, scale efficiency, or technical inefficiency will earn below normal returns and will be transferable at a price less than maximum market price. So that's the part where they're trying to get at why it's costly. A coal firm is transferable at a price less than the maximum market price, or what that firm would be worth. Right? The existence of potential gains from converting an economically inefficient firm into an efficient firm leads to the development of specialists whose function is to ferret out such prospects. So if you were walking around and like some of these shows where these reality shows, I've seen some show where it was the guy who makes your bar worth more money, or this guy that goes around and makes your restaurant, he goes around and fixes your restaurant so it makes more money and people like it more, right? That's a specialist that in this definition that they're using right there. And whatever it is that he brings to the table, if he can't bring it to the table for you, then that's how inefficient you are. Right? There's nothing that stops a cooperative from getting this type of person, right? And saying, hey, come in and fix us. We'll, pay you for whatever reason, right? But if they're talking about that person can't come in and own, right? Come in and exclude people from if a cooperative obviously has 100% ownership, they want to come in and do a change. Let's say it's a restaurant or something like that. They want to come in and do a change and own 50% of it for that change and then reap the rewards from that. Yes, that's a counter incentive for that specialist to come in and do that. But again, you could make an incentive system to where they reap the rewards for whatever it is that they do. It's just costly, and that's really where it's the long and the short of it. It all goes back to that algorithm that I was saying earlier. However much the creating a contract, how costly that is, it's just more expensive for a organization or cooperative, right? The non-transferable is not really non-transferable. You can transfer funds, right? The specialists, no, you can still have them come in and do things. One of the things that the assumptions that they have in this paper is that you're a nonprofit. And with the nonprofit, then there are things that stop you, like obviously you can't show the profit, and transferring assets and all that stuff then becomes a problem, right? But the cooperatives or joint labor-owned entities, they can do all kinds of things. So I don't see that it applies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and the part about the nonprofit part did slip my mind as well. And so yeah, a lot of sense. Um, Taylor, did you have any comments?
The main thing that I was thinking about was the experts, um, and the fact that I guess in the short term, potentially you can bring people in, and especially I guess if it's a small number that you need, then a hierarchy could potentially win. But if you're trying to grow a larger group and you're set up the rules for fairness and everything right, and you're building the company that's focused on whatever service or product they're doing correctly. Obviously, you still have all the issues with building a business, marketing, and whatever else. But if you're doing all of that correctly, then you should be able to win out on what you can offer to an expert, knowing that you're wanting to be fair and give them what it's worth. Someone else, even if they're bringing an expert in a hierarchy, is going to prefer paying them the least amount possible that the expert's willing to take, right? That's why you still have people, experts that are working at places like Google and Facebook and other places that go in, and some of them make some pretty great money, but they're not getting I'll say most of the time, they're not going to get a fair share of what they bring to the company. The, I think something that we've mentioned in the past was Gmail, and other products that have been created, and then what is how much money has been made there versus what someone's been paid. Someone may make millions and millions, but that may end up being, you know, less, much less than 1%, not even, just the amount for what's been brought in. So where's the fairness there? So anyways, that was it. I mean, I know there's a lot of other talk about that, but
Okay, okay.
I think one of our past talks, I'm not sure, Watson, you may remember, did we actually have a co-op talk where we recorded and we were talking about bringing in experts, not for advice, but actually hiring? I'm not sure if we've had that talk yet.
Um, like for talking about experts, there's a paper, but oh no, no, there is. Yeah, we do have one talking about experts, but it's about judging experts. It's not about compensating them.
Yeah, so the compensation and how do you do that versus bringing in generalists?
Hmm.
Um, I guess the only other side was I know it's common that people would think if you have the capability, you want to bring in experts, and they're always going to be more efficient. But the other side to that is whenever your work is not specified. I guess if you don't have the processes down or um, the exact product or area that you need, at which point, I don't know if you can call it expert generalist, if that's a term, but that's kind of off topic, I guess, from the cooperatives. You can have both experts and generalists, but sometimes it is more efficient to have a generalist to solve problems, because if you don't know the problem and you have an expert, it's possible that they have no experience in an area that you need, versus a journalist may have, let's say 20% experience in many fields. That's just a comment to one of the items you mentioned, Josh, as far as efficiency.
So let
Not
me,
really specific to a cooperative.
yeah, let me say this: when they're talking about a specialist, like let's not get confused when we're talking with that with an expert. The specialist, like I said, I'm going to say it again, the existence of potential gains from converting an economically inefficient firm into an efficient firm leads to development of specialists whose function is to ferret out such process. That's what they're talking about. So essentially, a specialist is someone who's willing to put their money where their mouth is, right? It's not simply that they know how. It's they're ready to invest. But if you can't allow them to own something, give them property rights and be able to own, they're not just gonna come in and just fix your stuff. They want to go to places where they can get compensated for what they do, proportionate to what they know and what you don't know. So it's easier to think about it as they're so confident, they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. They look at what you're doing and see, this guy's a joker. He doesn't really know what he's doing. I could fix that for him and take a piece of it, and he'd be better off and I'd be better off. Can I do that in this entity? Well, it maybe yes, maybe no. It's the equivalent of some okay, freaking Apple. When Steve Jobs came back, he took a whole bunch of stock, and he's like, yeah, I can handle this and bring you guys back. right? And they're willing to give it to them, right? That's what they're talking. Somebody who's willing to put their money where their mouth is that way. Whereas um, just somebody who's an expert at something, that's not expert versus generalist. No, I don't believe that they're talking about that here at all. Um, yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, yeah, okay. I can see where you're going here with the with that definition of specialist. The With that, I mean, I most saw it with just I most thought about it as far as just specialists in particular areas, more so the know-how than the bringing in the money. But that's definitely um, an interesting perspective to think about it with, you know, as far as like how much do they really believe in this thing? You know, how confident are they really in their skills that they're willing to do that? Kind of the testament to the specialist in it, this being specialty. But I want to touch on one more inefficiency. We're almost approaching the end of the meetup, but scale, basically, the inefficiency of scale that arises whenever an output um, does not minimize long run average costs. Whenever an output that does not minimize long run average costs is chosen. And so this is in the paper, Scully particularly um, mentioned this pertaining to things like economies of scale, of course, but also he had a great deal of focus on the legal constraints of inhibiting vertical integrations. Now, I think it's important to remember here that he is assuming that the cooperatives in this example in his paper are nonprofits, and the legal constraints were a problem if you were trying to maintain tax exempt status. And so, without that consideration, as far as a nonprofit, like in our case, um, it's it, well, in a situation where you're not a nonprofit, I don't see that legal constraint being a problem. Um, and if we're talking about like economies of scale here, um, I think that's just a matter of decision making. Given all things equal, without the with costless managerial performance, and without the factors of a horizon problem where you're not where you're not investing into the proper long term things, and you don't have a transferability non transferable problem, meaning a lack of specialists. I think you can definitely reach economies of scale. Um, I don't see why not, but essentially that's the whole thing about scale. So it's I could ask how do you solve this problem, but I don't with a in a situation where you're not dealing with a nonprofit. I don't think that's actually a problem there. But what do you guys think?
No, I don't see a problem. So it just seems a lot of what they're talking about is the nonprofit stuff. So,
Hmm. I mean, I agree. I mean, it's like given that nonprofit, if you're trying to maintain zero profitability, and if you do have any relationship with a vertical, if you're trying to make have any type of vertical integration, if any more than 15% of the returns from that are non-cooperative, then um, you'll face consequences from that. But I mean, you've got a whole different strategy in mind at that point, and as far as your business structure. But when you're um, when you're for profit, and then I mean, I think you just do what makes sense to maximize their profit here as far as scalability goes. Um, yeah, did you have any comments about this inefficiency, Taylor?
Nope.
Okay, okay. Um, guys, I think we've covered all of the we just covered all of the inefficiencies proposed um, through the paper efficiency and cooperatives. Like I said, we've all went through it here, guys. But if you're listening out there, it's a great paper, and it it's a great paper, and I mean it's worth a read. I'll be posting the link in the meetup. But yeah, guys, thanks for joining us. Watson, Taylor, do you guys have any last comments before we sign off here?
Nope.
Do we have thoughts for next month already?
Yeah, I was wanting to do strategy, cooperative strategy, but
Sounds good.
yeah. All right.
I think that's a nice piggyback off of this. I mean, I think this is a nice intro to strategy. You know,
Yeah.
thinking about the
Are
inefficiencies.
are you thinking it'll be tied into one of the game theory books or anything else? Titles that we can mention?
Probably the economics of strategy book,
Okay.
which is very, very expensive, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
tell y'all to buy it.
Sounds
Just
good.
yeah, post the link. Yeah. But all right, cool guys. I guess I guess that's it. I enjoyed this. I'm glad we could do it. But all right, cool guys. Signing off. I'll see you guys next month.
All right, take it easy.
All right, you too.
Thanks, Josh.
See you.
Appreciate it.
Oh, anytime.